Good morning. Welcome to the 8th Annual School of Business Power Breakfast. My name is Gary Giamartino. It's my privilege to serve as Dean of our SIUE School of Business. This is a terrific event, and as I mentioned, this is our 8th Annual Power Breakfast. It has become something like a family reunion because there are a number of people here, people who are part of the SIUE School of Business family. We have alumni here. We have students here, we have honored guests here, so if you don't mind, I don't know what it's like when you go to family reunions, but when I'm at a family reunion, I'll always look around and say, Mom, I remember the face, but I can't remember the name, I can't remember who they are. So I'm just going to ask some people to stand up and be recognized so that we can recognize the members of our extended family this morning. Will all of our outstanding business, all of our School of Business alumni are outstanding, and all of our outstanding School of Business alumni, please stand. All of our School of Business alumni. Will all of our advisory board members and alumni board members please stand? Now, some of you are going to end up standing through a couple of these, so I apologize. Thank you for our advisory board members who are here. It's my pleasure to introduce this morning our chancellor, our new chancellor, Julie First-Bovey. She's here this morning, and we're delighted that she's here. And sitting next to Julie is Dr. Ann Boyle, our interim provost and vice chancellor for academic affairs. I'm looking around, and I don't think our other vice chancellors were. Oh, there, Nobi, good. Narberth Emanuel, our vice chancellor for student affairs. Glad you're here, Nobi. Thank you. Let me ask now a very important group of people. Can I ask our faculty to stand? All of our faculty in the School of Business. Faculty, thank you for being here this morning, and thank you for inviting the next group of people who I'd like to introduce, and that is all of our students. Can we have all of our students please stand and be recognized? Now, before you sit down, students, I just wanted to make a couple of comments about why you're here. Okay, you are here because you've been recognized by your faculty as people who are special students. You have been noticed by your faculty because of something you've said in class, by something you've written in a paper, by something you have done which has attracted their attention and indicated to them that you have great potential, not only as a student, but great potential as a business professional. And that you would probably benefit from being at an event like this. So this morning, please take advantage of the people of talking with the people that are at your table this morning. Take advantage of meeting other people who are in the room. Take full advantage of every opportunity that is presented with you this morning to network, to practice some of those skills that you learned in orientation and that you're learning in your classes. This is just the beginning. I guarantee you, this will not be your first business breakfast at 7:30 in the morning. It may be your first this year, but it won't be the last that you'll attend. So enjoy today, take advantage of it. We are thrilled that you're here. We're thrilled that you're at SIUE in our School of Business, and we're very proud of you. So thank you for being here. Please be seated. The job of selecting a Power Breakfast speaker it's an easy job, but it's also a difficult job. It's easy because we have so many accomplished and outstanding alumni. It's difficult because we can only ask one person at a time. We have about 20,000 alumni, so you can see how it can be a challenge. Our past speakers have included Dion Juanu, who is now the CEO of Advantix Systems, an Israeli company. He still works out of Miami. Fernando Aguirre, the president and CEO of Chiquita Brands. Steve McCann, the former chief financial officer of Long's Drugs in California. Tim Keenan, the co-founder of High Performance Technologies, which is now a dynamics research company. Karen Molnar, retired audit partner from KPMG. Jan Patrick Schmitz, the CEO of Montblanc North America, and one of our guests this morning, Mitch Myers, former Anheuser-Busch executive, CEO of Zippotoni, and a serial addicted entrepreneur. We're delighted to have Mitch here this morning to represent some of our past Power Breakfast speakers. This year's speaker is James Schlueter. James was granted an MBA degree from SIUE in 1984. He grew up in Edwardsville, Illinois, and one of our tables this morning, someone had their smartphone out, and I said, "What are you checking email, checking baseball scores?" No, they were checking to see if there was another town in the United States named Edwardsville. How many did you come up with? There's one in Ohio. So that's our trivia for this morning. Jim grew up, as I mentioned, in Edwardsville. He obtained a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Illinois, then started out on a career which, for many young men, is a very seductive, very exciting, and a darn difficult career to make a living in. Jim started off as a sports writer. So he, as you might imagine, he's very excited about this time of year, being a baseball fan and a sports writer. After working for several major newspapers, including a now defunct newspaper in Collinsville, Jim decided that he might want to hedge his bets by looking into studying for an MBA and thus opening some options for him in some field of business. I hope, Jim, that you'll share a little bit about the story of how you interviewed at McDonnell Douglas after completing your MBA and how that came. The outcome of that was a surprising direction for your career. We're very pleased to have Jim here today for a number of reasons. First, as Director of Communications for Engineering, Operations, and Technology at the Boeing Company, Jim's responsibility and career trajectory represents the kind of accomplishments that reflect the outstanding alumni who are selected to deliver the Power Breakfast. Jim is responsible for the company's technology and operations communications activities, including media relations, employee communications, executive communications, and advertising. When you read, see, or hear about some of the incredible technology behind one of Boeing's world-class products, defense or in the defense or commercial businesses, chances are that Jim has indirectly or directly crafted that message. He's held numerous positions at Boeing here in St. Louis, in Seattle, in Chicago, and around the world. Another reflection of Jim's accomplishments is that he will be inducted into the SIUE Hall of Fame tomorrow evening with another one of our guests this morning, Walt Knepper. Walt, we're very proud that you're going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame as well, along with Jim tomorrow evening. The second reason we're excited about Jim being here is that he's spent a career doing and leading corporate communications. This year, our School of Business is launching a revised undergraduate curriculum that places unprecedented emphasis on communications as an essential tool for business leadership. Jim's responsibilities have included coaching, and I suspect sometimes more direct methods of working with Boeing executives to help them communicate important messages to internal and external audiences for Boeing. Finally, the support letters we received from Jim's colleagues at Boeing had something very special in common. They all pointed to Jim's knowledge of the Boeing company and its products and its people as being one of the keys to Jim's success at Boeing. Jim understands that communication effectiveness is enhanced when the communicator knows what he or she is talking about. And in fact, when we talked about Jim coming here, Jim interviewed me for about an hour about what we were doing in the school, about the changes that we were making in our program, so that his remarks this morning would be appropriate for our audience. As with all of our Power Breakfast speakers, their leadership and influence extends beyond their company and their job. In Jim's case, while in Seattle, he was actively engaged in the community with the board of the Seattle Museum of History and Industry and with the Seattle Sports Commission, demonstrating the importance of giving back to the community which has hosted and supported Boeing's many years of growth. Later this morning and this afternoon, Jim is going to be meeting with two sections of Management 331, our project management classes, and he's going to be sharing with students in those classes some of his experience in communications and project management as well. Jim is going to speak for about 20 minutes this morning, and then we'll have time for questions and discussion. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome James Schlueter.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. I know it's early. Like the dean said, it's not going to be your first one. Or this is your first one, it won't be your last. It's just great to be here. Gary, thank you for that introduction, and Marilyn for all of your hospitality in my coming back to the university. And it means a lot to me also that our new chancellor is here with us. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you all carry this with you. Excuse me. But I have here my copy of SIUE Connection. I'm sure you all carry it with you wherever you go. And I read this great interview with the chancellor, and I, of course, noticed in there that her undergraduate degree is in journalism and a master's degree in journalism studies. And so don't take my word for it. You can get a journalism degree and be a success in life. In fact, a lot of things we're going to talk about here today for the next 20 minutes or so is the importance of being good at a few different things, not just one thing. It's very important that you're good at what you're studying right now, but it's important to keep learning and getting degrees or getting expertise in other areas. As Gary mentioned, I did grow up here. In fact, it's a rural area, or it was rural back then, about 10 minutes from here, and it was called Glen Crossing. And I don't know if anybody here knows what Glen Crossing is, but I think it was named because the road out of Glen Carbon crossed 159 a little bit south of 270. And back when I was growing up, on one corner was a big, beautiful baseball diamond, and on the other corner was a tavern. And between the ball diamond and the tavern, that was pretty much our social life, and it took care of it for us across all ages. Now, I think there's a dental office on one corner and a big old funeral home on the other corner. Life changes. So, Glen Crossing was a rural suburb of Glen Carbon, way before Glen Carbon was cool. For those old enough to remember that too. So I went to Glen Carbon School. It was K through 6 back then, and I was labeled a Glen Crossing kid, one of the rural boys. Then I went to the big city for junior high. I went to Edwardsville Junior High School, and I was labeled a Glen Carbon kid. Again, way before Glen Carbon was cool. Then I go to the University of Illinois, and I am labeled a downstate kid. Of course, downstate for Chicago starts at Joliet. So, I mean, I am from the deep south, y'all, being from Edwardsville. So, what does that all mean? I don't know, but I think I do. It's kind of a Yogi Berra-ism. It doesn't matter where you're from, but be proud of where you're from. You know? It doesn't matter where you're from, but be proud of it. So, yes, I am proud to be part of Glen Crossing history and the old Czech people who live there. I'm proud to be part of Glen Carbon, although I still don't believe it when I see it. And I'm very proud to be part of Edwardsville and to say that I'm a native of Edwardsville, and a big reason why is because this university is here. And this university has done so much for this area and this community that we should celebrate, but then also realize that all of us in here have the responsibility to keep this university what it is and the contributions it makes. So thank you again for having me here, Gary, and the school. And I hope that in the next 20 minutes or so we can have a good conversation about what it means to go to school here and what it can mean for your life. And for sure, please ask me questions. I'm an old reporter. I'm a PR guy. I love answering questions. I love asking them. So let's jump ahead to 1981. I had graduated from the University of Illinois the year before with my journalism degree, and I was a sports writer at a good, strong, medium-sized daily newspaper, Central Illinois, that will go nameless, at least for now, with a circulation of about 45,000. And it was the perfect place. You couldn't have dialed up a better place for me. It was close enough to Illinois, to Champaign-Urbana, that I was able to continue to cover Illinois football and basketball and Purdue athletics as well. And I was able to also cover the local high school teams. There was 4 of us on the sports staff, and I had replaced a guy who went on to a daily newspaper in Philadelphia. So I really thought, if I do what he does and the others do, that I would meet my laser-focused goal of being at a major daily by the age 25. That's what I wanted to do. But there was only one problem. The work itself was killing me, mentally and physically. We put out a daily paper in the afternoon on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We were an afternoon paper. On Saturday and Sunday, we were a morning paper. So I had one day off during the week. I had a sports editor who didn't understand or didn't care about personal life, so he'd never tell you when you would get your day off until the night before. And the hours were horrific. I mean, 13, 14 hours a day, and the paper didn't believe in paying overtime to reporters. So I was kind of going backward in my finances. The hours were horrible, and when I went in and talked to the managing editor about how really kind of struggling here with this kind of lifestyle, he did the historic, prototypical thing that editors would do back then. He opened up the old file drawer and showed me all the resumes of the people who would apply for this job. So, like, dude, if you don't want it, I can find somebody else. And then I looked, and I did look back a little bit at the turnover rate, and it was high, and I thought it was because people were moving to bigger newspapers, and actually it was about 75% of it was they just left there, period. So at the age of 23, I had one of those life moments. I talked with my dad, some other older folks I knew and respected and that were in the journalism field and not in the journalism field, and I made a new plan. I would take the GMATs, I would apply at SIU Edwardsville, and I would pursue my MBA with the idea of broadening my portfolio. And so it was I did that, and with equal parts uncertainty and the thrill of telling someone what they can do with their job, I strode into the managing editor's office and told him 2 weeks. So down I come back to Edwardsville, I start my MBA school, and midway through my first term at SIU Edwardsville, I took a new job as the sports editor of the Collinsville Herald, the snappiest little 2 times a week newspaper you ever saw. Worked with a couple, 3 SIU graduates, Pete Stamen, Paul Guzzi, and we had an intern for about a year. Her name was Paige St. John. And if that name sounds familiar, she's a distinguished alumni from here, a 2011 Hall of Fame member, Pulitzer Prize winner, and I knew her when. I knew her when she was an intern. So the setup was great for me at the Herald. I got to cover the famous Collinsville Jayhawks basketball team and other great sports. My classes at SIU met once a week for 4 hours a pop, which was great because my newspaper schedule was pretty flexible. And I would take a heavier load in the spring and summer and a lighter load in the fall and winter just because the sports seasons lined up that way. And it took me 3 years to get my MBA. And it should be noted that none of my undergraduate coursework contributed to my graduate studies. It truly indicates I never thought I'd go into the corporate world. So as you can imagine, it was very difficult. It was very eye-opening. I learned about things like cash flow worksheets, net present value calculations, PERT charts, human resources planning. It was an entirely new world that I really had no clue about. So that leads to lesson number 1. Changing course is okay. In fact, it's a good thing. But bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you're planted. I assure you, I had no clue where I was going when I was going to school here. I didn't know how this was going to turn out, but I was going to be the best student and learn all this new stuff and be the best doggone twice-a-week sports editor I could be. So to me, when I see SIUE, the E can stand for embrace where you are. and be the best you can be at it. So I finished my MBA in 1984. I didn't even think about a job search for a while. My brain just had to decompress. Working in school and all that was a lot. But pretty soon it was time to put the degree to the test, and I was on the job search. And in early 1985, I became aware of an opening at McDonnell Douglas. And, it's now part of Boeing, but it was the St. Louis company, aviation giant. And they had an opening for an employee newspaper editor. And I applied with that shiny new MBA. And sure enough, I was asked for an interview with the manager of employee communications. And during my visit, I also sat down with the crusty old director of public relations at McDonnell Douglas. This is a key point here. So before going into the corporate world, he was like Lou Grant. He was this old TV show. He was out of Central Casting. Crusty old dude, was a hard-boiled old city editor at the big newspaper in Little Rock, Arkansas. And he actually, when I walked into the office, he actually offered me a cigarette. And he peered down, he had my resume, and he had the old half-moon glasses, and he peered down at it. I would need them too, but I have contacts, so I would have had to do that too now. But he looked down and he said, a sports writer and an MBA? I go, yeah. He said, I never knew a sports writer who had any brains. But you have an MBA, you didn't cheat or anything, did you? I said, no, I'm a sports writer, I'm not that clever to cheat. So the interview went pretty good. I felt good about it. But after a couple days, I got the dreaded thin letter. The one that says, thanks for coming in. Very impressive candidate, but we're going to go in a different direction. However, we enjoyed talking with you, and we were going to keep your resume on file. I was disappointed, but I showed it to my dad, and he said, actually, that's a pretty nice note as far as rejection letters go. So I would go, all right, I'll keep it. Matter of fact, I'll check with him, check back with him in a month or so if I'm still looking. But then something kind of unexpected happened. Later that day, I got a call from him. And the manager of employee communications, she asked me if I wanted to come in for a second interview. And I said, sure, but in the name of transparency, just want to let you know that I just received a letter from you today that indicates something different. And she said, oh yeah, the person we had selected backed out. So why don't you come on back in? So I did. Had to talk with the old guy again. But within the week, they offered me the job. And I started in a couple of weeks, and the rest has just been a wild, wild ride. And if you'd have told me growing up, right up through the ripe old age of 23, if I was going to do this for a living, I would have asked for your car keys. Wouldn't want you to drive under the influence or anything. It just was not something I was going to think about doing. And as Gary mentioned, one more thing. After a couple of months, when I was confident there, I asked my new boss about that person who had backed out of the job. The person directly responsible for me launching my career now at the Boeing company. And she said, yeah, the guy took a job with the Ladies' Home Journal to be their business writer. So for years after that, if anyone ever asked me what my favorite magazine or newspaper was, Ladies' Home Journal. So, lesson 2. My MBA here made me different. It made me different. They looked at me funny. You're a sports writer with an MBA? I was different. I found out there was about 100 candidates for that job. But I don't think anybody had that MBA with it. So this, to be able to be here and come back to the place that made me stand out, that's important. That is real important. And think about that as you go through your careers. What can you learn? What can you do to make yourself stand out? Be unique. Okay, so that's 1985, and ever since I've been a PR guy, but I've really thought of myself as a writer with an MBA. And I won't go into laborious detail over 27 years, but there are a few key aspects, things I did early in the first few years. There were a couple of key strategies that really helped set my career up. I don't think I really called them strategies back then. I probably just did them because it sounded like a good idea at the time. But first, I focused on my strengths. I saw myself as a journalist working in a corporate world. I was a writer. And I focused on that skill. I kept working at my writing. I wrote a lot. I looked at other writers. I studied the craft because I wanted to be known as a good writer among the communications team at McDonnell Douglas, as well as the executives and the engineers and non-communications people that I worked with. I wanted to be known that I gave them more than they expected when we worked on things. And to this day, when we look for people to hire in communications, that is the critical skill. And I'm sure anywhere you go, if you can write, you're going to put yourself ahead of the other folks who don't put as much emphasis on it. As part of that, too, I also wanted to keep my reporter's mindset. I wanted to question everything and not go along with the corporate speak or the corporate line. Now, that does require a bit of judgment because you have to realize you do have an employee badge on, and you're not an investigator reporter with 60 Minutes or anything. But I know my department appreciated that willingness to ask questions and provide a good solid dose of critical thinking. So that was very helpful for me. So that reporter mindset, writing and asking questions. The second good thing is to be willing and eager to accept new assignments to gain experience in other parts of the company. It helped. I did it a lot, and it helped in three major ways. One, I got exposure to a bunch of really cool things around the company. I got to work in the space division with astronauts and the shuttle program, our tactical missiles division. We used to make something called the Tomahawk cruise missile. Sounds awful. No one really wanted to talk about it very much, but in January 1991, at the beginning of Desert Shield, then President Bush authorized shooting 54 of those things off of ships out in the Gulf. And I was the PR guy at the time on the Tomahawk cruise missile and other missiles. And next thing you know, I'm talking on the phone to the Today Show about how cruise missiles work. And that they went from being destructive weapons to the cutting edge of smart weaponry and smart defense. So knowing firsthand about all the cool things your company does is really, really important. And it made me a more valuable resource to the company than I realized. Secondly, I learned about other areas of my craft by these different jobs. I came in as a writer and an editor in employee communications, but I learned and practiced media relations, which was a natural for me since I was a reporter, but a different discipline. Advertising and branding, communications planning, other areas that when it was combined with my MBA skills were really helpful. And then finally, I worked and met a lot of people. I found mentors. I began relationships with people who would turn out to be future leaders at the company and some future bosses. And it's really, really a great opportunity. And I understand, I've picked up this morning that our students here have mentors. And I really can't think of a smarter or better thing to have than a relationship like that. And just keep in mind, if you're technically called the mentee, or the mento, but if you're technically called the mentee, just realize that your mentor is going to learn from you too. And the best relationships in those are two-way relationships. So, lesson number 3, search for depth and skill, but breadth in jobs and assignments. It really worked. Then, let's go on, came the seismic shift in my business career, the merger, capital T, capital M. On August the 1st, 1997, I went to work like any other day in hot, steamy St. Louis in August. But one thing changed. My employee badge didn't say McDonnell Douglas anymore. It said Boeing on it. And understandably, here in St. Louis, there was a lot of angst about it. But for me, it was great news. I just thought about all the possibilities of being part of Boeing. There was a lot of churn at the time. Functions like communications, human resources, and others. It's kind of a dicey time when you're in a merger because redundancies get found out that way. And that can be kind of a perilous time. But I was fortunate. I was doing international communications on our fighter sales campaigns. So I was in a place where people appreciated what I was doing and they left me alone. And I had plenty to stay busy and energized. And then after a year or two, things were starting to settle down. And then something else crazy happened. In 2001, Boeing moved its headquarters from Seattle to Chicago, Illinois. And it went from being in Seattle, where there's 87,000 people who work for Boeing, to setting up a shop of 400 people in a skyscraper in Chicago to be their corporate offices. And we could spend the next day and a half on why they did it. But the short answer is, after Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas, it did that to balance its portfolio. It became about 50% commercial business, 50% defense. And since Seattle is so connected to commercial airplanes, the CEO wanted to move that out of there and to a neutral city, preferably in the middle of the country where you can get to different places easier. So they moved it to Chicago. And as for me, I always wanted to work in Chicago. I still root for the Cardinals, but I always wanted to live in Chicago. It's more fun to be around the Cub fans up there. But sure enough, thanks to all the people and programs that I'd known about, I was asked to take the Director of International Communications Operations position when it opened up in early 2002, and that's when the MBA really helped. I'm talking about at the table. There's a dirty little PR secret that's really not a secret. PR people hate working with budgets. It's like sunlight to a vampire. Start showing them budget forecasts and planning, and they just run back to their cubicles and start writing news releases. So when I got that new job, my new boss said our budgets were a mess. He needed me to sort through it and fix it, but don't drag him into the details. He couldn't bear the thought. And you could tell like he was asking me to reroute the Mississippi. He just thought this was impossible. And I can't say I blame him, but our finance people made sure that we categorized our spending so we didn't get in trouble with, charging with the government customers. They're very good at all that, but they don't care the detail of what you spend it on as long as it's in their category. So the problem is we just kept doing the same old thing, paying for the same old stuff, and we weren't being strategic. We weren't putting our resources on the things that we really needed to do, as we say, move the needle with our audiences and taking them to where we wanted to take them. So we cleaned up our spending. It wasn't foreign to me. I knew what all this stuff was. In fact, it was a heck of a lot easier than the stuff I had to do here at SIU. And we actually were able to reduce our spending and do more. We can't do that anymore because we got a lot of the fat out of there. But we were able to do that. And we did it within our budget plan. And once again, people looked at me funny. They said, "Schleter, you understand this budget stuff? I thought you hung around with reporters and stuff like that." So again, it's great to be different. And lesson 4 is, if you're in a business and it isn't on the strategy and you can't count your results about how you're doing and why you're doing it, if you can't count it, it don't count. Now, it may be an easier thing to remember in disciplines like accounting and finance, but in areas of advertising, marketing, I know Mitch would tell you, if you can't count it, it don't count. So that was a great job in Chicago. Learned a lot in public relations, planning and all that, being up at corporate. But then after 2 years, a former boss of mine who had become the head of communications at Boeing Commercial Airplanes in Seattle called me, and he needed me to come out and lead media relations and sales communications for commercial airplanes. Now, my family had only been in Chicago for 2 years with me, and we had a couple young kids, but it was really a no-brainer, and it was another great ride. On the media side, commercial airplanes is so much different than the military or corporate world. I mean, every day was a day with the national or international media. Every day we were talking to the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the national TV news. And on the sales side, I was fortunate to be at the table doing communications plan for big campaigns with big airline customers. These sales guys were cutthroat with Airbus, and these were multi-billion-dollar deals, and they demanded help from communications. So we had to be proactive and be creative, but we also had to protect the company's reputation and sometimes protect our sales folks from themselves. Not that they would do something illegal, but they would do anything to secure a sale, even things that down the road would harm us with our stakeholders, whether they are the financial analysts and shareholders or the news media or our employees. And you've deserved your seat at the table when you can tell a salesperson no, and they listen because you're going to work real hard at finding another way that you can say yes to. So after 3 years, my boss moved back to Chicago to lead the entire communications function at Boeing headquarters. and I replaced him as the head of communications for Boeing Commercial Airplanes. Wonderful, wonderful opportunity. It did come, though, during 3 of the rougher years at Boeing. It coincided with the 3 years of delays on our new airplane, the 787 Dreamliner, that you may know is now being delivered, but unfortunately was 3 years late in getting to our customers. But we did have some great experiences. One of my favorites was, if you ever watch the Today Show, there's a wonderful segment called Where in the World is Matt Lauer? And he did one at our Everett plant in Seattle, north of Seattle. At Everett is where we build the 747 and the 777 and the 787. It's the largest building by internal volume in the world. It was a great story that Matt did. He pointed out that you could fit 12 Empire State Buildings in our plant there, and just other cool things. But a lot of our work was in a defensive mode at that time, dealing with customers and media and Wall Street analysts and employees who were disappointed by the delays. But through all those difficulties, we knew we had a winning airplane. We knew that our long-term communication strategies and plans and our people would get us there. The plan and vision were always in place, and now we're delivering them, and they're doing wonderful work and wonderful work for our passengers and our customers out in the field today. Eventually, the opportunity came to return to the Midwest after those 7 years. And as Gary said, for a year now, I've been in Chicago with a great job, one that I always had my eye on, supporting the Chief Technology Officer and being responsible for communications for all of our advanced research work. It's all the cool stuff we do to stay ahead. And when it comes to communicating about it, sometimes it's a little trickier than it sounds. Sometimes the company doesn't want to talk about all the new stuff we do for fear of what the competition may see. Sometimes our customers don't want us talking about it. But it's our challenge, and we work through it with dialogue and conversation and strategic planning. And I've been able to bring a lot of lessons I've learned to lead this team in a new way. We bring in people with strong writing skills. We make sure that our people know the entire range of the Boeing business, from the missile technology to 787s. We take advantage of all the people we've worked with over the years. We work with finance and HR and accounting and all the other business functions to develop really comprehensive plans. And we share our expertise at the table. We talk about our communication strategy and the impact it has when they are making business decisions. Our leaders are making business decisions. So we integrate communications into company strategy. So lesson 5 is kind of a recap. It's be good at what you do as an individual, but be part of a team, contribute to the team, and bring what you've learned to your next assignment, your next job. In your case, bring what you've learned in this semester's or this term's classes to your next one. So that brings us to today and about you. I hope through sharing some of these stories you can see yourselves, because I can definitely identify with where you're sitting today. When I was in your shoes, as I said, I had no idea where this would all take me. For all I knew, I could have stayed a sports writer who happened to have an MBA. But I did know one thing. I knew I was in a good place at SIUE. And I knew if I invested my time and my brains and my energy here, things were going to work out. You have a lot going for you here. You have yourself and all you bring to class and to your interactions with your students and your faculty. You have a great resource in this university and all the things that it can bring to you. You have a dedicated faculty who want you to have the best experience and learning experience here, and you have each other to help each other and also, yes, to compete with. I found in my personal life in going through school that having smart students around me was the best thing going. In my sports writing days, I covered a fair share of track and field back when it seemed much more popular in the United States than it is today. And you could see firsthand that in most cases, if a runner or a field athlete recorded a personal best or a record, it usually came when there was somebody behind them pushing. And I believe that holds true in the classroom as well. However, Collaboration and helping is another key aspect to our learning. And that's why, as I've asked Gary, the dean, about changes that are taking place in your curriculum, I really like what I'm seeing. Because courses on understanding a business environment, courses on what it takes to work on group projects and project management, and exploring the ways for you to transition from an academic life to a business life and culture are critically important. Not just to be prepared for a successful interview process, but to get to a good start in your careers. Because believe me when I tell you, and I hope you know this isn't a paid public service announcement, but as you could kind of tell from my experiences, everything in business is a group project, everything. And to add to the fun, the people in your group may come from a completely different skill set, discipline, or area of expertise than you. If your degree is in finance, or you could have a bunch of engineers with you. You could have human resources people. You could have folks from IT, sales, marketing. You might even have a crazy PR person with you with all their wild ideas about, you know what, we want you to talk to newspaper reporters tomorrow. And they look at you like you're from the moon. So embrace it. Embrace those around you to make you better. And you will be noticed, you will be sought after, and you will be valuable in your positions. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And if you have any questions, please be sure, bring them on up and ask me. Thank you again.
Jim, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We do have time for questions this morning, and I'm wondering there are some microphones around the room, so if the first person who has a question might head over to the microphone where Christina is. Okay, Walt.
Thanks a lot for your remarks, Jim. I guess one of the things you mentioned was about small newspapers and that sort of thing. And I wonder what you think their long-term fate is. And there's so much consolidation in the print industry, the disappearance of the on-the-ground reporter and stuff. I'd like your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. One example is my own newspaper there, the Collinsville Herald, which is no longer around. I think it's part of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Suburban Journals kind of networky kind of thing. And there's a number of things that are going on in the journalism industry that is very difficult for reporters and also very difficult for us in media relations and corporate communications. Number one, those papers are dissolving and going away. There's not a business model for them anymore because no one needs the ads in those publications. We get everything online. Even the larger newspapers are running into that situation. I know for a fact earlier this year, just to pick one, the big newspaper in New Orleans is called the New Orleans Time-Picayune, one of the great names in newspaperdom. But it doesn't come out in print every day anymore. It may come out twice a week. It's all online. The problem for that is, to us, is it's marking an increase and in growth in online media, whether they're blogs or they're commentators or they're online things, and that's taking its place in the news and media world. And the difficult part for that for me is that there was a certain culture and ground rules with reporters that we grew up with, in that, you know, a reporter may write a story you don't like, and they may have a premise you don't like, and you make sure and you talk with them and you get your side in there, and it still may have a story that you don't like, but you knew it was going to be written well and it was going to be edited, because that reporter would have to put his copy or her copy through the desk editor, the city editor, the news editor, and then it would go to what we used to call the RIM, the copy desk, where the copy editors would read it. So it got looked at about 3 or 4 or 5 times, and you had a pretty good chance that most of any inaccuracies or holes or gaps would have been found. And it was much more accurate than a lot of people would give credit for. But in this day and age, If you're a blogger, you don't have an editor. You can write whatever you want, and it gets out there. And what happens next then is a reporter picks up what a blogger has written and runs with it, or it just gets out there through online sharing and everything. And then you have a potential problem that you have to deal with. So there's no such thing as a news cycle anymore. It's all real time, 24 hours a day, and you have to deal with it. But it would be a very, in the near term, it'd be a very scary time if you're going to be a journalist and coming out today, because I don't know where it's going. Well, but the one thing though is that in the long term, I do believe that our society and our government and the way we live in the United States is based on journalism and a free press. It's just we don't know what form that journalism is going to take. And whenever someone figures out how to make a buck at it, which they're still struggling with, that's what we'll have to deal with.
I teach an MBA level class on decision-making crisis as well as ethical decision-making. So can you talk a little bit about the role of corporate ethics within communications and how we communicate some ethical issues, as well as your opinion of ethics sort of at the corporate level?
And I'm happy to answer that question because you nodded knowingly when I mentioned the Crossing Tavern.
Yep.
Ethics is a near and dear subject. Over the last 10 years, ethics has been a very, very serious subject at Boeing, as we have had from the very top, our topmost senior executives at one time or another run afoul of that and spend jail time, get fired. So I would answer the question in two ways. Number one, we work really, really hard in how we communicate about ethics at the workplace, and it's about as difficult as it can get, because an example is, I think it's very important, for example, for the students here to get exposure to these kind of activities, breakfast meetings, cocktail receptions, other kinds of things that you do in real life. Because what happens if you're at a cocktail reception and someone comes up to you and says, hey Blair, I've got these great tickets to this Bruce Springsteen concert. You're a good client of ours. How about joining me and my wife and going to see Springsteen? And at the Boeing company, if a supplier did that to you and you took them up on it, you'd get disciplined in a big bad way. You violated very, very important ethics laws. So teaching people and training and the importance of it is a big part of communications for what we do. On the other hand, that the other answer is some of the value, again, that we provide at the table in communications. Because one of the old cliche terms is, does it pass the New York Times smell test? You want to make a decision on something. One thing we can do and we should do is say, hey, wait a minute. Are you really, are you willing to do in the darkness if it was in the light? And what would happen if the New York Times found out about what we were going to do? And this has nothing to do with whether it's legal or not, whether the lawyers can say it's legal. Because they'll say, oh yeah, and that's what they do for a living, and that's what they should do. From the letter of the law, it's okay, it's legal, you won't get yourself in trouble. But we deal with the reputation side. And if we say, yeah, we can do that, and it gets written about, and our answer is, well, it's legal, it's not good. And reputation is a trickier thing in a way, because it's not written down in law, but it's written down in what's the right thing to do and what is your ethical standard. And we do operate at any company, whether you're publicly traded or not, you deal with the license, in a way, of the general public. You operate in the public world because the community thinks you're okay by operating there. And if you violate that, you put yourself in a bad position all the way around. That's a great question.
Jim, I think all these kids are interested in, other than
That's a great question, Mitch. Let's see. So first off, there's the skill set, and of course there's the writing because we're communicators. But a little twist on that is your ability to communicate in the ways of today. So, your ability to use all of the social tools that are out there. I think no matter if you're an accountant or a finance or HR, human resources or others, you have to be able to have the ability and the fluency of communications today. And it's never been more important. You all are better prepared coming out of school than any previous generation of students come out, in my opinion, because the rate of change in communications, and I mean little c communications with one another and in a society, you have it on top of the old people who are older than you. Because as I was telling the dean as we were walking out here, I'm just studying Facebook and understanding it now, and my 17-year-old daughter is so past Facebook, and I don't even know what she uses to communicate with her people. But the other thing that is really, really important is poise, judgment. When someone comes in for an interview, and we've been hiring a lot of people who are earlier in their career, do they sit on the edge of their chair when they're talking with you, or are they sitting back and kind of slouched a little bit? And those physical cues of alertness and poise and looking to do the job and that energy is really, really important. We pick up on it really fast. And one of the things that I like when we hire younger employees, people who are newer in their career, is that energy, that they want to go do things. They want assignments. They go find assignments to do. They get up early, they work, they have fun in the evening, and they get up the next morning. For me to have that kind of energy, I'd have to be in bed by 8 o'clock. It's really important, and I think it's only more important as the years go on in that terms of that technology and that understanding, that you provide insight, you provide skill and technology and things that we don't know about, and you provide that energy to revitalize an organization. You help renew the organization again. So I hope that answers it a little bit, Mitch. It's a great question.
You mentioned several times the strengths imparted by being cross-disciplinary, both academically and professionally. Were there any situations in your early professional career that posed kind of a learning curve for you, where you maybe weren't prepared, had to adapt? And is there anything that we as students can do to prepare for those situations, to be ready for anything, so to speak?
Yeah. Great question. If I looked at something, it's on the business side, I was lucky. I was very, very lucky, because since I was a rare bird being an MBA, I could have put together a really rotten cash flow analysis and no one had known any better. They were just happy to see someone was keeping track of things. But if I would give an example, the learning curve thing is a bit of it comes back to the mentor thing for me, because if I ever had a situation where I was jumping off into something that I hadn't done before that was a risky endeavor, it would be when I started doing media relations. Because just a little background, I was a reporter, and that's basically what I did when I started at McDonnell Douglas. I was the employee newspaper editor for one section of the company. So I was interviewing people and laying out pages and photos and doing all that stuff. But then, as I was recognized as someone who should be given other opportunities, there was another opportunity where I started being a more rounded communicator, and that included media relations. And that was a risky endeavor, because that means you're going to be talking with reporters, you're going to be giving them comments, you're going to be quoted, or you're going about something we're doing. You're going to be responsible for lining up perhaps some expert when you get into more detail, and some expert on a product that you set up for an interview with a trade magazine or the Post-Dispatch or whatever. And I hadn't done that before on that end. And it was difficult and it was challenging. But the key was I had a mentor who was understanding. So if I screwed up something and didn't do it quite right, my mentor's name, she was just an outstanding communications executive. Her name was Susan Flowers. Before she worked at the Boeing Company, she worked at the Botanical Gardens. She was the director of PR at the Missouri Botanical Gardens. Her last name was Flowers. But she was so skilled and so understanding that I could make some mistakes. I could go up that learning curve. She would coach me, do this a little bit better this time, do that a little bit better. Whatever you do, don't do that. And it got me to that place where I was doing it often enough that then you get into that comfort zone. But a real big part of when you're going to branch out and you know the learning curve's in front of you is utilize whether your mentor is your boss or your mentor is someone in this room or someplace and say, hey, I'm about to do something. Do you know about it? And if say you're going to ask Walt, do you know about this? Okay, 70% chance Walt does. 30% he doesn't. He knows someone who does, and Walt will call up one of his pals and say, hey, I got Blair over here who needs a little bit of help. Can you? And they'll do it, and they'll be happy to do it. They'll be so happy to help that can really work. I had a call, or actually it was an email about 4 or 5 days ago, and there was a student in graduate school in communications from Syracuse University, needed some help on something in communications. And a guy that I work with kind of sent it around to 3 or 4 people saying, hey, does someone have time to talk to this person from Syracuse? And 3 or 4 people were, well, I guess if I can find some time, I'll do it. And I said, hold on a second. I know a guy in Boeing Communications because I hired him. He went to Syracuse. So I said, shoot him a note. And it came back and said, I'd love to do that. So he'll spend 3 hours talking to the guy because it's an old, he went to Syracuse. Where the rest of us would say, okay, we'll do it because we feel like it for 15 minutes because it's the right thing to do. So find that mentor, find that connection. People are willing to help that you wouldn't expect because that kind of networking really does exist and go around.
I have a question. You talked about social media and crisis management, and I couldn't help but thinking about the Mitt Romney's video about 47% comments. If you were running his PR campaign, what would you recommend for him right now? What can he say to kind of come back?
I think the first thing would be if someone ever asked me to do PR on a political campaign, I would take this cougar red tie and throw it around here and put it over a tree and hang myself. Let's see. Usually, let's say I'll temper it by saying political campaigns it's just a whole different beast, and it's so different and so white hot in emotion and all that. It's a completely different ball game, and so the ground rules that I typically do, whether that would work or not, I don't know because it's just so crazy. But from my world, if you get caught in a situation like that happened there, when you're in my mind, in my book, you just fess up. Don't try to talk your way around it and say, oh, I meant this, or whatever. In my book, stanch the bleeding, cut it off, and just go forward. Say, hey, I messed up. I shouldn't have said it. Shouldn't have said it the way I did, and go forward. And just do that the day of, and go. But
But Jim, isn't it interesting that, corporations can't change their story every day? You have to be true to who you are and state the facts and tell the truth. I find it so interesting that these politicians can change their story every time they show up in a new city, and how does that not stick to them?
yeah, and I guess the difference is is that as a corporation, we talk a lot. We're out there all the time, but they are out there so much. I mean, it's not very many people go around and just they everywhere they go, there's 24 reporters following them, and that constant scrutiny, that constant coverage, the fact that, if I was a political candidate, that all of you out here would probably be videoing me, let alone the one in the corner, and getting something out there. It's just exponentially so much higher how often you're there. And it is truly such high volume and emotion that it's really difficult. And you're right, you could find yourself countering yourself every day about what you're doing and where you're going. But so I guess the answer is, unfortunately, and there's nothing. Well, I tell you what, there is one lesson, of course, is think how much you should do before you go and talk, because you can't put the genie back in the bottle once it's out. I mean, once you say something like that, you're going to be in a difficult challenge, and you have to assume in this day and age that anywhere you go and whatever you do, you're going to be videotaped. I mean,
New York Times scrutiny page.
yeah, it's taken that to the nth degree. I mean, a celebrity can't, you can't fall down the steps. Next thing you know, it's all around the world on YouTube. So, but that's really a great point.
Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
I know we could stay here for another hour with great questions and getting your observations and comments about media and communications, but we're going to have to give you a break so that you can attend a class.
And they got to go to class.
And they have to go to class.
They gotta go to school.
So please accept a small token of our appreciation for you being here today. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to SIUE and a pleasure to welcome you back to Edwardsville.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to do just a couple of quick commercials before we break. The MBA. I'm pleased to announce that the MBA program that Jim is a graduate of, Mitch is a graduate of. We have other MBA alumni here today and other MBA students. Was just acknowledged for the seventh year in a row by Princeton Review as being one of the top 297 business schools in the country. So we are absolutely delighted about that. And I think part of our reason for continued success with that program and our other academic programs is due to the terrific things our alumni are doing. Alumni like Mitch, who's been inducted into the Hall of Fame, and Jim and Walt, who will be there tomorrow, our advisory board members who support us, and alumni who come out and give their time back to our students to help give you the advice and give you the advantage that can help you in the workplace and through your professional lives. We're very grateful for that. So Jim, thanks again, and thanks to all of our alumni, and congratulations to everyone who's involved in helping to create that reputation for us as one of the best business schools in the country. This weekend, there are other events coming up. As I mentioned, Friday evening is the Alumni Hall of Fame. Tomorrow afternoon at noon, we have a program that is led by some of our accounting alumni. Walt will be on a panel with Diane Ryan, who is our other inductee into the Alumni Hall of Fame. They'll be talking about alternative dispute resolution with the IRS. It's going to be a great program, a continuing education program for accounting continuing education credits, and anyone else who might have a dispute with the IRS. I think that as we roll into the weekend, will continue to be a great weekend. I hope you all have a great weekend with your professional plans, with your social plans. Let me thank all of the students today who have done whatever you've done to be recognized by your faculty and to be invited to this event. And thanks to all of our faculty who took the time to be morning mentors this morning. We appreciate what you do, and it helps our students become great alumni. Thanks very much. Have a great weekend.